And we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Happy Tuesday. Happy Fat Tuesday.
Happy Mardi Gras.
Know? Yes, happy Mardi Gras. Sia, are you in New Orleans or?
I'm not anymore, so it's just Tuesday.
Okay. Well, happy
That's what
Tuesday.
we always say. It's like everywhere else is just Tuesday. It's very depressing not.
Well, welcome everybody to State of Web Performance. I'm super excited today to be here. I'm gonna go ahead and share my slides really quickly. Today is February 21st, Fat Tuesday. Thank you so much, This Thought and my team, for helping put this together. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do all the amazing things that I get to do. I get to work with some cool people. So if you're looking for anybody or anything, let us know. And we're also hiring, so you can always come hang out with us. We just released workshops, and these workshops are a little bit different from most workshops you see because it's in all the like new technologies, some old, some new, but we're doing workshops with like Quick and Svelte. So yeah, check it out, sign up, come hang out with us. We do have diversity tickets too. So if you're interested, send me an email, tell me why you feel like you need to be sponsored for the workshop. Upcoming events that are happening, we have office hours every month. So React and Vue office hours are happening, and you can check them out on React.js Meetup or VueMeetup.com. We're doing some in-person stuff. So if you're in Atlanta, you can come hang out with us. We have some great speakers that will be happening there. And then every month we get together for this monthly mentoring woman in tech thing. So it's a private session. And if you just want to come, it's all levels to hang out and just chat. That would be great. State of Note is also happening March 21st. My name's Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at Lady Leet. I'm the CEO of This Thought. And Henri, one of my favorite people in the entire world, who has rapped with me before. Where were we? We were at like AMP something.
Yeah, a few different places. I've been to I think some of your meetups in the Bay Area as well. I think
yes, Modern Web.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah,
glad to be here.
Yes. And then we have an amazing panel of folks today. We have Sia, who is with us from Shopify. Alex, good to see you, from Microsoft Edge. Estela, who's a web performance specialist at Schneider Electric. And then Yoav, who is on the Google Chrome team. So, really excited. We see the chat here. I haven't looked at the chat yet. Okay, I see some comments happening, some hearts, some love for Estela and Alex. But if you guys want to tell us where, guys and girls want to tell us where you all are from, that would be awesome. And again, no question is a bad question, so feel free to post it as we are going. Yeah. But maybe we can start off with just like, what are you guys working on? What are you all working on lately? Anything fun? Anything interesting? I know y'all are working on great stuff.
Well, I'm going to start since everyone's still waking up. I mean, I'd say there are several things, but one that's always going to be dear to me is getting developers to sort of like level up, you know, especially in the performance space. I'll keep beating this drum throughout the year, I think, but the performance literacy is of utmost importance, and so I mean, I'll travel around eventually, you know, giving some talks, but also, you know, a lot of times mentioning the fact that we're in a space where performance is not as clear cut as it once was, and I think the literacy part comes in very handy. So, I mean, I'll talk about, you know, this course that we have and stuff like that and other things associated with it. But I think just generally the performance literacy for all developers is just personally game changing, but also it'll enable you to sort of make reasonable decisions around the tooling, especially some of the frameworks that you're potentially using. I'll say that much.
Yeah, I feel like the conversation around like performance literacy and educating people on performance has been something that's like, it's like, man, it's a job that never ends. So again, really thankful to have all of y'all here. Estela, what are you working on lately?
Maybe it sounds really general, but I'm working on improving the web performance culture at my current company, and also trying to improve the web performance processes. That means analysis, reports, and also the tooling. So it's quite general, but it's my business as usual activity right now.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, what about you, Yoav? Just gonna randomly pick.
Yeah, I like a couple of things that I'm most excited about. Because I'm like, trying to move a million things at the same time, and none of them is moving as fast as I'd like it. But a couple of things I'm excited about is one, being able to properly measure soft navigations and SPAs. This is something that, like, Alex has been talking about this since forever, about like making sure that people who go down the SPA route do that consciously and while taking into account the trade-offs. But it's been near impossible to do that in a scalable way without like fully instrumenting your own SPA and your own and the framework you're shipping. And right now we're on the verge of actually getting that done in Chromium. So it's in origin trial. And you can now sign up to measure your soft navigations and get LCP, FCP, and first paint for your SPA routes, and that's something I've been working on for a long while, and I'm super excited about. And the other thing I'm excited about, which is a bit less mature, is mechanisms to deliver compression dictionaries that will allow us to have delta compression working on the web after many years of trying to get that done and not being able to make it actually scale. So I'm hoping that this time is different, but time will tell. That's.
Can't wait to hear the details.
Yeah. We're gonna have to have you on some of our podcasts, on the Modern Web podcast or something, to talk more about that stuff. And hopefully here too. So I'll go to Sia next.
So what have I been working on? I feel like my work life got interrupted because we had this like internal hackathon, which maybe I go too hard on them, but that's like when my competitive spirit does come out. I'm like, I'm going to deliver the best project ever, and so that they can see that this is a good thing. But I did it on like a RUM solution, or a real user monitoring solution for our merchant data, and that was really fun. But now it's like, trying to maybe turn that into a project, but also still supporting. So my group mainly supports merchants themselves, so making their merchant websites faster. But then because we believe everyone should have that opportunity without having to go through a professional services agreement. But we write a lot of, like you were saying, Henri, providing education. So writing up blog posts, providing some office hours, also looking at some of the things we see across multiple merchants and trying to see if there's ways we can make fixes back in the platform. So, a lot of, not like one specific thing, but like juggling a lot of things at once, and like, what's the next big target that we should really focus on.
Cool. Sounds pretty interesting. And Alex, we always love to hear from Alex. What are you working on? How many front burners do you have?
I have a few, but I do work on the Edge team. So about half my time is spent on sort of performance-oriented things. I think I've hinted at this in other places, but about half my time is spent working with our first-party teams at Microsoft to try to improve the state of our web apps. And this is kind of a continuation from work that I used to do when I was on the Chrome team. And in all of these cases, the goal has not been to work on performance. I feel like this is maybe easily lost. The goal is to sit with teams and learn from them what web platform problems they've got, so that we can go and fix them, right? So we can learn what the next set of features are that they're going to need, so that we can get ahead of it, because it takes us a long time to do anything, as Yoav will I think ruefully tell you, to get anything done on a web platform. And so as a result, like, that kind of directed learning is incredibly important. And unfortunately, almost every single time that you sit down with a team now, they are beached. They are stuck on performance. They are completely hosed. Sometimes their launches are blocked. Sometimes they've launched and it's on fire, but it's a bad time kind of universally. So that continues to be the trend that we started to see back in 2015, playing out now, even in the desktop space, where a lot of these things that we thought we could afford on desktop, actually we can't. So a lot of remediation, a lot of hand-holding, a lot of counseling, a lot of working through the stages of grief.
It truly is true, right? I mean, Alex, you talk about 2015, and that is like, I feel like that's when it's like, in every year, I'm like, okay, this year is going to be the year that everyone gets web performance. You know? No, go ahead.
I it's like the year of the Linux desktop, but I do think that there is something in it that Core Web Vitals has changed a lot of the conversation. I don't think people are attributing it to Core Web Vitals, but my intuition, my downstream of observing the community and reading the blog posts and looking at what people are talking about suggests to me that the impact of Core Web Vitals was understood first and foremost inside the kind of JavaScript industrial complex. They knew what they were selling wasn't going to work anymore, and they've made the next turn. The narrative continues to turn one new metric at a time. So like I'm constantly hopeful. That the ever-present spirit of Annie Sullivan hangs over us all and wishes us the best. So
Absolutely, I spoke to her last week. I'm going to pivot quickly to Estela, because you had mentioned something earlier about changing or working to ameliorate performance culture inside a company. And I've always believed that was pretty important, though I've never really kind of talked about it. I did recently, just to let people know, it's like a lot of it is like top down. If management is not really into it, chances are developers won't be either. What has been your experience so far working at, is it Schneider Electric?
Yes, Schneider Electric. So far, so good. I mean, I joined the company less than a year ago. And in fact, they were looking for that particular role. So management was really focused on trying to improve web performance. I mean, the company is aware of the impact for our users, our customers. So this is important. That helped me a lot to get involved with the different dev teams, because we have many dev teams for different platforms that we have on the web ecosystem that we have. So that helped me a lot, let's say, having this management vision to work on that. However, when I think that the most difficult part was when you need to talk to the different dev teams to keep them involved in this, because some of them were more aware of this. They were aware of, basically, I think all of them uses Lighthouse. So they know something about web performance, but looking at the performance score is not enough, right? You need to know more about the different web performance metrics that compose that score and how they are measured and the thresholds. And in fact, I think that the Core Web Vitals, as you were saying before, helped a lot to make different teams be more aware of this, because now they can look at specific metrics with specific thresholds. And also we have like pressure from other teams, not only dev teams, because we have like SEO teams, marketing teams also involved on all these web performance topics. So I think all this environment helped me a lot to introduce this web performance culture, and so far so good. I mean, now I'm like the person to go when they want to implement something new to make sure that this doesn't cause any degradation on web performance metrics. So my experience so far, it's been really, really exciting.
So basically they come to your desk and you pull up web page tests and you're like, let's look at your
Yeah, more
you
or
caught
less.
that. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, yes.
I mean, I definitely do, and maybe you can get anyone else to sort of comment on this. I also felt that when core vitals really were introduced, that umbrella, the tent got a lot larger, and there were a lot more people who kind of came in asking, looking for answers, and then this multiplicity of blog posts started to sort of like show up, and people had particular opinions, but ultimately I think it did take the work in a good direction. I mean, Sia, especially since that you do work with merchants, and there's like this very important e-commerce element to it. What have you seen from your end?
In terms of people getting on board with improving web performance, I think it was less the core web vitals and more that that it was going to start impacting their SEO. And regardless of how much it impacts, I'm cool with it. If that's how they got on board, I'm happy, right? So now they finally care, even though it was probably more important that they were probably losing sales because their website was too slow. It's just like what they didn't necessarily pay attention until Google said they might put their rankings a little lower. But I'm good with that, right? If that's what it takes people to get on board, and the net effect is that the end users experiencing faster sites and can get the jobs done that they're trying to do on websites faster, then I'm happy and with less annoyance. Yeah.
And
So,
Yoav,
That's an easier way to sell it. Actually, every merchant I talk to, I have to kind of educate on that it's not Lighthouse, and this is what your real user data is, and this is actually what's impacting your SEO. I still put it in there because I know that that's going to pull on their heartstrings more than just the good of being fast. But I'll use.
It would be great to have some sort of website or something where it's hey, I mean, I know there's so many numbers out there, that say this impacts, this can impact X amount of revenue, but it's so hard to draw a direct line sometimes. So it'd be amazing if you could just plug in some numbers and then it spits out how much money you're losing. That makes the conversation about web performance for e-commerce very black and white,
Well, yeah, that's what we were looking at. Can we show it gets a little complicated once you start showing, because you can show conversion rate along especially speed metrics like LCP or FCP. And they're interesting. I know Nick Jansma, is that how you say his last name? Had a really interesting talk at PerfNow. So if you go to perfnow.nl, is that the site? You could find all the talks last year about this. I mean, we've seen because sometimes conversions and bounce rates don't necessarily correlate the way you would think they do, but usually they do. At least for the merchants that we've had, faster sites are faster. But also the other thing I always have to remember is sometimes it looks weird because if you just look at conversion rate, if you make your site faster, you're actually getting, this is that thing, I think I forgot what's his name wrote the article about it, but the survivorship bias. It's once you make your site faster, you're actually getting more people in that probably abandoned before your analytics even caught them. So you actually have more people coming in, but your rate actually might be kind of weird, but your total conversions could be higher because you're actually now more accessible to more larger population.
I know.
I went down that level, but
No, but there is some sense to that. Before I sort of follow up with that, Yoav, what have you seen from as one of two people, but I know you're in the depths. What have you seen from your end at the browser level in terms of just working with the web vitals and some sort of the research and potentially innovation that's coming out of that research?
Yeah, so basically, I'm a big believer in core web I'm a big believer in aligning incentives, and I think core web vitals enable creates a shared language that enables everyone to talk about the same things, and then aligns the long-term incentives of the platform with the short-term incentives of developers in a way. So I think that's you know, a very powerful thing. And just like in terms of recent research, I think that when it comes to responsiveness, for example, Core Web Vitals started out with FID, which in a way was a participation medal. Everyone got a a lot of sites.
We're all waiting for IMP.
A lot of sites with objective responsiveness issues were still getting good FID scores. And with the move to INP, which stands for Interaction to Next Paint, it basically aligns things with the platform's incentives with the user's incentives, and basically scores on the full responsiveness of, for the full lifetime of the page, and in better ways, in more complete ways than what FID gives us. So I'm looking forward to that becoming, right now I believe it's experimental, but looking forward to it being more than that in the future.
I'm gonna, before I pivot something else, if I may, you talked about responsiveness. We're talking about Core Web Vitals, and since you're also, for those who don't know, Yoav is on the Web Performance Working Group over at the W3C. I hope I'm not outing you, by the way, Yoav. Excellent. I know there's been, even though it doesn't sound like it's going to be a Core Web Vital or an actual, recognized metric, but there's been some conversation about around rage clicks. I don't know if you want to sort of like expand on that for the audience.
So first of all, rage click is a term I think coined by the Impulse folks, potentially before they were many years ago. Essentially, it's like when the user clicks multiple times on the page because the page is not responsive. So Annie recently presented on the Annie Sullivan recently presented on that at the WebPerf Working Group. I don't believe there are plans to make that metric, but it is something that correlates with responsiveness problems in various ways. At least in certain applications. Some applications just, the nature of user interaction is that they click multiple times in the same place, for example, games. But in many other applications, it correlates well with responsiveness problems. So it's in a way a good metric to test that we are, that are like INP or any other responsiveness metrics actually shows you real problems that annoy users. So it's essentially, I think that the conversation in the WebPerf Working Group was more around being able to align the definition, because right now, like I said, it's being used in Impulse, it's being used elsewhere. We're thinking about maybe also, maybe integrating that not as a metric, but as something to correlate with in other places. And we'll need a well-defined definition in order for all of us to speak the same language. So.
Yeah. And obviously this is, has to do especially with the fact that, the world is on mobile, So rage click is definitely a real thing. So whether you be on a platform like Shopify and someone's trying to buy something and they're just like continuously hitting buy, and then the Beyonce tickets are gone.
Or they think they're hitting and they're like, everything's moving around.
Yeah, exactly. Which brings me actually to another question I had, and something that I know has been sort of discussed in the past, but may have been brushed off. But this is where I want to sort of like pivot to Alex. I've sort of believed in this conversation very early, but I don't think it's given enough time of day. I know you've been very adamant in sort of getting people to understand the landscape of hardware and how a lot of that has is like as we say in chemistry once upon a time, because I was a chemistry major, the limiting reagent of web performance. And essentially, like, things do not go unless your device goes as well. So did you want to sort of expand on that potentially, especially for the audience who may not really understand what's going on?
Sure. I mean, we are always on the web programming the devil's computer through a straw, right? We don't control the network. It might as well be tin cans as far as anyone's concerned. We don't control the customer's device. We have no control over the user's hardware. We can barely detect and only poorly respond to software that we don't like. So like just the user agent version. If you're a native programmer, you're used to being able to look at what else is running on the system, being able to understand not just like some abstract idea of core count, but like, okay, what are the cores, right? What can they do? How fast is my disk? That you can bring your own database with you. None of that stuff makes sense in the web context. The web is the additive errors of all of a bunch of really hard problems coming together. And this is why I focus so heavily on the complexity of the output that we're sending down the wire, because however bad you think it is in terms of the network and the devices that you're programming to, I promise you it's worse. At the limit, it's worse. And Sia mentioned the hysteresis effect, right? The idea that there are some unknowably large set of users out there, potentially, that you may be excluding, that would like to be using your service. If you're a public sector, who are probably residents or citizens that you will want to be serving by mandate. If you're a business, that's potentially lost business. And so those set of users, they're not going to show up necessarily on your run metrics, because they may bounce super early, right? Like a lot of those things may get filtered out. They may look like they are way in the tail until you do work to improve the performance of the site to really get a handle on it. I was reminded, an acquaintance was telling me that they had done a study at their sort of mid-market e-commerce thing, that kind of white labeling for a bunch of different brands, but it was pretty big system. And they had thought that the cost of a kilobyte of JavaScript to their profitability was about $100,000 in revenue a year. A single kilobyte, and they had many dozens of kilobytes of JavaScript, many hundreds, in fact. And it turned out that it was north of $700,000 a year in lost revenue per kilobyte. And it's really like, it takes. This is kind of why I think we always need to be a little bit more skeptical about what we believe, about what we can afford, because these kinds of effects show up in places that we don't expect. And we can be right. Like, I think you can be saying, yeah, we sell product handbags. All of our users have the latest iPhone, and they have the latest M1 or M2 devices. But that might only be true because you have decided to exclude other customers who would be happy to pay you. It can be the case that the causal arrow doesn't flow the way you think it does. You may instead be saying, I want to restrict the set of people who can come into my store to people who are wearing $1,000 worth of jewelry, right? That might be what you're saying. Rather than saying, I would like to sell jewelry to anyone who can afford $1,000 worth of jewelry, right? The difference between those two statements is large. And I think we often get it wrong specifically in the JavaScript community, because the JavaScript community is high on its own supply. But the web development community in general sort of may not have the finest most developed understanding of those factors and how they play out in the real world.
Yeah. That's the literacy, folks. I get back to it. Anyhow, and with that being said, sort of, and I'm going to pivot to Estelle here as well. You've been, at your company under a year now, as specifically someone who's coming in to sort of, sort of enhance the performance culture and whatnot. In some of your early conversations at Schneider Electric,
Yes.
correct.
Electric.
What kind of like discoveries, what were you hearing from developers, that you knew was potentially just like misguided, sort of like thinking around some of the work that they were doing?
Well, there's been a lot of conversations with several teams, and I mean, every single team has their own issues and their own, let's say, beliefs, because they are also working with different technologies, in fact, because we don't have like one standard technology for the entire website. So it's been complicated because some beliefs, such as, for instance, one common belief that I've seen in many projects is, for instance, lazy loading everything regarding images, even if they are above the fold. So that's like a common issue. Like, we that work on web performance, we do know that that's not a good practice, but it seems like it's commonly known as a good practice that, yeah, it's good, but please, images below the fold, right? So, for instance, that was an interesting conversation with some comments such as, but then you, anyway, it was weird because in my head, it doesn't make any sense. So I was really surprised to discover these kind of things. But also, for instance, hydration is also something really challenging. So I have a lot of different issues to face with the different teams, but yeah, all the different teams have their own beliefs, and yeah, it's an ongoing work to work with them. To also, I try to educate them, preparing sessions, sharing some good practices, and showing them some anti-patterns that maybe they think they are good, but that's not good. So these kind of things is challenging, but it's also exciting because you also see that once they implement different things that you recommend, you see also the results in the RAM results. So you are able to see that directly with data from real users. So that's exciting because that's also motivating for them to keep improving the different things that we have.
Nice. Now you mentioned that they're sort of working with different technologies. Like, what stacks have you seen at your company across? Like, is it like this multiple range of stacks that they're using, and it's like a different conversation every time?
Yes and not, because I mean, we have some of them that they are really unique because we are using like a third-party software, but other parts are using like build whatever you need to build to make sure that you provide this output. So we are also working, for instance, with web components, but every team uses web components in a different way with different technologies. So it's complicated, and so that makes it more complicated also to fix the issues because you need to go one by one to make sure that you identify the issues, and also the developers also need work, also need time to investigate this because they've been doing this way for many times. So they need also to investigate how to modify this, because also many times you depend on the framework. You can't modify it directly because it's the framework itself that is making some behavior. So it's challenging.
So you're trying to tell us you're busy?
Yeah.
Muy ocupada?
Muy ocupada, yeah. That's
okay.
it.
All right. Just checking. Are we gonna pivot to framework conversations? Should we just blow up the whole show right now?
Apparently, my
But,
dog.
Yeah, exactly. Your dog's excited now. But we, the React, documentary came out. React turns 10 this year. The framework conversation again can't really be avoided. Estelle just mentioned that within her the several teams that she sort of, guides and tries to help, there are several different frameworks being, used, and which is resulting in several different conversations individually. So, is there, and I know, I feel like I know Alex's answer already, but I'm going to put this out to the rest of the audience. Alex, you'll be free to chime in as always. Is there a situation where, and this is what I've believed as well, that people don't, well, we know they likely do not pick the right framework for the right gig, right? The right job, the right output that they're looking for. Is this a much bigger problem than we believe? Anyone?
That varies on how much we believe that's a problem, I guess. But I think that the problem here is that people are buying into a framework extremely prematurely without knowing what the consequences would be. So there's no way for them to try it out and then see what would be the performance implications. It's 2 years in that they discover that the rewrite that they did with the framework that they picked is a disaster from a performance perspective. And then it's basically, if they admit that, they are in trouble. So that's I think the root of the problem. There's no real way to measure. There's no maybe there is maybe the right thing to do would be to prototype what they want to build in multiple different stacks and then try out and pick a winner. But I don't think a lot of people are doing that.
I do wonder too, because I feel like all of this started happening before people started paying attention to performance because of the previously mentioned Core Web Vitals / SEO impact. And so now that they care, I wonder if they would maybe pause and consider the implications of some of those decisions. And it's not to say like a framework isn't always, it's not always the worst. There's trade-offs. But I've seen, for example, on Shopify, there's some themes that are using a front-end framework, Vue. Actually, I haven't seen a React one. Hydrogen is a different thing because it's more optimized for full stack. But I'll see people using just straight up front-end Vue to do things, and it's just there's no way I can make their shop faster because the entire front end has to happen after everything is delivered. And so it's I have a big block. Actually that, and then also there's this separate A/B testing personalization, which is a thorn in my side too, because I also can't, it's the same thing. I can't do anything to make that site faster because you're reaching out after everything's rendered on the front end and reaching out somewhere else to get more content to pull in. And that's not an easy thing to fix. Or it's impossible to fix without the actual tool or the service they're reaching out for. Sorry, that was a slight aside, but it's kind of similar. It's when you're doing only things on the front end, yeah. But the original thing was I wonder if maybe people would pause with that decision now more than they would have 10 years ago when it was kind of a brand new shiny thing. I don't know.
Yoav, I think you were going to say something, or Estela, go ahead. Okay, I saw your mic.
Okay. No, I agree with Yoav regarding that. I think that teams don't try different frameworks and pick up the proper one, because also frameworks are even more complex and more complex. So also let's say to be updated, it requires a lot of time also for developers. So it's kind of hard for them to switch to another technology if they spend a lot of time to also keep improving and keep learning the different new things that, in fact, I think frameworks add because they need to solve different issues. So they are making more complex all the ecosystem. So it's quite complicated. It's a never-ending story.
Oh my God, I just blanked out. Hold on. Oh, so we're talking about
double down on the other thing Yoav said about people are not finding out until after they put all this work in to build and launch, and then like a few years in, now they're seeing that everything's slow, and I'm like, I can't really fix it. Like there's an architecture problem here, which is a much harder problem to solve than when you're like, oh, you're just lazy loading this image, like stop doing that, and then it'll be a second faster.
I mean, I'm gonna before I sort of ask Alex something here. I'm gonna sort of bring up a little comment that I saw here, which is from Jesse, who said, "Sadly, I think people are going to pick what they know," and this is actually something that I've sort of alluded to as well. I think knowing something usually requires a little bit of depth in knowledge, and I've always said that I think generally you can grab the majority of frameworks out there. And if you deep dive, if you know a framework extremely well, you know where the sort of the failings will be, and you sort of make the updates accordingly to make it as fast as possible. So, are we potentially, faced with a situation now where people are just jumping into frameworks because they're like, yo, I heard Svelte is banging. Yeah, you too. I heard that too. Let's jump in. And then they suddenly they deploy and they find out, as to Yoav's sort of comment afterwards, 2 years later, that this was the wrong pick. Now, I want you to chew on that for a hot second, but since we were talking about teams, and I want to sort of pivot to something that I know Alex had said before. You had sort of mentioned that you're starting to blame less the actual teams and more like team management and some of the leaders of these teams, and sort of green lighting some of these decisions that really were not the correct ones.
Blame is too strong a word. Let me put it this way. We all make decisions under uncertainty. And while I don't hold engineers blameless, right? Like engineering is not a new thing in society, right? We aren't the first engineers to walk the planet. In fact, we're the very pointiest end of a very long chain of engineers. Like you don't get a computer without people who know how to like organize the physical sciences for hundreds of years before we get to transistors, right? Brunel was making bridges long before we got LCD displays. So there's a societal relationship to engineering that involves a social license to operate, right? When engineering mostly turns into the automation of disaster construction, there isn't much reason for society to want more engineering, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I think it's fair for us to have this idea of a responsibility to our customers, to their users, to society at large, especially if we're working in the public sector, about, first do no harm kind of. So that's the engineering background. But engineers we're default optimizers, right? Like our job is to try to like make the things that we are told that are important to us fit inside the resource budgets that we're handed. And those budgets are not usually in our hands. Maybe if you're an independent founder, you're just a one-person shop, you're just starting out, then yeah, you see the whole picture, it's all yours. You get to make those choices. Outside of that, you have influence, but not control. And so we can choose to use our influence in lots of different ways. But in a lot of cases, the allocation of resources won't be coming down to our choices. This is where I think we are in the thickest problem right now, which is that we have a real crisis in sort of product management. I think that the Bay Area idea of product management for digital services is pretty thoroughly broken. I wrote a post and gave a talk at the same conference that Sia mentioned, and Yoav was at, and Estela was at in Amsterdam last fall. I started talking a little bit about sort of, I wrote a post before that, and then someone else gave a talk on it. But I'll find a link and we can maybe put it in the comment in the chat. But there's this idea of performance management maturity, which is missing from what it means in the definition of a product owner today to do a good job about operating a high performance or a high achieving service, which is to say that aspect of management of the product isn't being managed. And so when the requirements are handed back down to the engineers, they don't include that in the list. right? So what we get is an externality. What we get is, you push on the water, and then the water moves to someplace else, right? Unless you actually put a whole container around it. And so we need to put performance into the list of requirements and constraints that we actually put on the products. And I believe that, when we do that, so Core Vitals is doing a softer version of that right now with regards to what Sia mentioned in terms of SEO. That when we do that, we are good enough engineers to make different choices, right? Like that we will adapt and adopt different technologies. And I think we're starting to see it. I think we're starting to see that Core Vitals is shrinking the space for what I think you can conservatively call nonsense about frameworks being the way that you should build front ends for most sites. There is a data-driven, analytically grounded idea that we could use for describing the length of sessions to understand which users will benefit from more JavaScript up front versus the ones that won't. I hope that we get to that conversation. The work that Yoav is doing will be important there. The work that the community has sort of put in so far to try to enunciate these metrics, things like INP, I think are going to be critical components of that. But for the moment, we're just at the moment of saying, oh, wow, yeah, leeches aren't working, and a different brand of leech isn't suddenly solving cancer. We're not going to bleed our way out of this.
But I think that's it's like there's web performance, accessibility, right? Are kind of all bucketed into this whole yes, it's important.
Even user experience.
Yeah. And people can keep talking about yes, this is important. Yes, this is important. This is why it's important. But I feel like what I've always seen is this disconnect between, again, how much money is it affecting? So how many sprints do we want to send on it? And why should we constrain ourselves and move slower, let's say, by caring about these things? Because the business people or the product owners or whoever don't understand the business value of it, right? And one of the things that I'm loving seeing these days are kind of these tools. There's a lot of tools right now coming out based on developer productivity or how to be able to better manage your development teams and kind of metrics as people are doing development, right? To just again create more high performing teams, right? And it'd be kind of amazing. And are there any tools out there that are kind of being baked into what developers are doing on a day-to-day to kind of help them be more successful? Because I think those guardrails, or at least saying hey, this is important, that would be amazing. Again, that's especially where I see the trends going with everything else related to
I mean, it sounds like Sia and her team are doing their best to pull their merchants to see what their issues are. And you said at some point that maybe this is something that you need to sort of fix at the platform level. Is that not correct?
No, not quite. Because also our platform doesn't actually provide the front end. We provide the tools. It's actually, my boss just said this. He was like, it's like when you go up to an RV park and the connections are there. That's what we provide. But we don't actually provide the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Although things that we do can influence how easily they can build the features, like the jobs to be done thing. So we can still impact there and a few other places. But no, I was thinking about, so I think I mentioned earlier, I used to be in semiconductors and semiconductor capital equipment. And we used to talk about design for manufacturing, because it's don't take that literally, because it's a little bit of flip of what we're doing. It's we're not taking into account, we're not building for the end user. Whereas when we talked about design for manufacturing, is because they would give us this product that was impossible to manufacture at a reasonable price, which was it actually ironically might be what people think they're doing sometimes when they pull for frameworks. And again, I'm not saying frameworks aren't the solution sometimes. But like, it's kind of like that. We're not designing for the end user. And I think this actually comes across like it's performance. Performance to me is user experience. That's the only reason why I care about performance. I don't care about it just for the sake of it. I care about it because it's a poor user experience and, you know, the things that come along with that too, like access and equity and things like that. But, and then, you know, the other things like more sales. But, I think we do have this tendency in engineering to discount the importance of those things. Like we get kind of caught up in some of these, oh, it's cool to do it this way or whatever, or, you know, I can do my job faster this way. And then if you're like at a dev shop or at a company that really harps on pushing features, you're going to be pressured to ship things fast and you're going to take shortcuts. You're like, what's the quickest way I can do this feature? And I'm not going to consider, sorry, my dog is excited. You know, whether this is like, you know, is it the right feature? Can a user get their job done faster? Is it accessible? Can like, you know, can more people access it? And is it fast enough? I think sometimes we discount that, and it's how do we bring that forward? And I think this is probably, I'm beating a dead horse at this point. Core Web Vitals and the SEO stuff started making people be a little bit more aware of those things, and like, how can we push that more? But yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, and that was essentially what I was saying, like, you know, what is, you know, Shopify doing to sort of like help, you know, with this sort of, you know, potentially common mistakes that you might see. And it's like, okay, we're going to make this change here so that, you know, this can sort of be resolved. So that's what
there
it
are
meant.
some things like, yeah, because there's different, when you have a platform. So like our platform, yeah, you bring your own HTML, CSS, and HTML, but at the heart of it, I still think of it as a CMS. Like it's a platform for selling things, but it's also a CMS. When you build your pages, you can drag and drop things. It's meant for people who are not developers to be able to build. And so you have this situation, like, for example, you don't know what order those sections are in from a developer standpoint, because someone can move them. So like, oh, do I need to lazy load or not? So you end up having these other issues because like a theme developer doesn't necessarily know where a user is going to plop a section down. And so how do we then design our API so that we can make it easier for the theme developer to make the right decisions when they are doing their code and can indicate which things should be lazy loaded versus not lazy loaded. So things like that. And then we're trying to, our team, at least our small team, is trying to push for a heavier emphasis on real user data instead of like lab data. We haven't really talked about that. So I don't know if people who are listening know the difference between
we definitely could. And that's another thing, I think, area that needs absolute, you know, literacy. Yoav, I feel like you were going to say something. Maybe I was wrong.
Just that, like, regarding both of those conversations, as long as performance is in the same bucket as eating your vegetables, and, you know, like, it has to be tied to incentives. It has to be tied to product outcomes. And yeah, I think that like commerce is a great place to create that connection, but it still requires education. It still requires literacy, as you say. So
yeah.
Is the Chrome team at all thinking, or like Edge team, Firefox, like anybody thinking about like, you know, again, like Lighthouse, right? I mean, we're like, okay, well, that's default now for people to look at, but it's kind of not forced developers, encourage developers to really pay attention to that. And I think people love seeing that, right? Like not this, oh, I need to do an assessment within my organization to see how web performance actually impacts me. But like, man, you know, the browsers are telling me what to do, which means I should obviously do it. Can we be more prescriptive in that area?
We could. I think this is a place where I have a disappointment with the way browsers have behaved, right? Like Core Vitals is a step up. It indicates that we are, you know, closing the circuit between what users actually experience and what we're starting to tell in a very, I mean, it sounds like a megaphone given that it's going to affect SEO, but this is actually a pretty quiet channel. I like to use the analogy of the little lock icon. You know, we upgraded the entire web to be, if not more secure per se, at least have connections hidden from all of the middle parties. And we did it intentionally over a series of, probably for 80% of the web, something like 5 years. It was intentional. We did it in lockstep together. We decided it was important, and we just went and did it because we knew that the most important real estate in the browser is that little thing. And if it shows all of the stakeholders effectively that something is broken for even some of those users, then that's going to motivate change. Thus far, browsers have been extremely unwilling to use their own UI surface areas to inform people who can make decisions and changes about the fact that the decisions that they've made aren't working for many users. So we are lacking in the browser being the kind of guarantor of that solidarity between the decision-making wealthy class and the people who are actually going to be potentially excluded from these services. We're not doing that today. I think it's a disappointment I harbor. I don't know what others think about what browsers could be doing more of.
It's an interesting conversation for sure. Sort of like, yeah. I mean, I think it's. I mean, I feel like it's one that was being explored at one point, but not so much. Well, actually, no, because I remember behind the flag there was something in Chrome behind the flag that just vanished. And no, it was not JPEG XL. It was something along the lines of you were getting warnings, like if it was like the page was too heavy or something like that, and then it just took off, and I was like, okay, whatever, maybe there was something wrong that they couldn't implement that well or whatever. Yoav, you have something to say apparently.
I don't necessarily have insights into that. I don't remember the reasons for that, but I agree that we could do a lot to incentivize developer behavior in the browser. At the same time, it's hard to do it's hard to do that based on the current session. Maybe we could integrate correct results into DevTool like that. There are various ideas I can throw out, but it's like ideas are cheap and actual engineering bandwidth is less.
I do think there's like a lot of lack of knowledge about that real user data, because Lighthouse was cool, but it can also distract, even though it tries to prioritize things, but people still take I feel like the wrong advice from it, and then they try to fix things, and then the performance doesn't change, right? So that was one way we tried to do an algorithmic type fix of oh, let's give specific advice, but I have come across the rare person who has used it in a way that actually sped up their site for multiple users. So maybe it's more how do we bring education so that the rest of the populace better understands real user data and oh, this is my biggest problem and it's on this page, and now I need to go see why is my LCP so slow on my product page, and it's usually mundane things. So you're lazy loading your LCP image. You have too much JavaScript, or you have too many third parties, Yeah.
So that is relatively easy. If you're lazy loading your LCP image, this is something the browser knows and can tell you. And if you're opening up DevTools, theoretically we could surface errors from your Crux. We could surface those kind of errors into Crux and then surface that in DevTools. So if you're opening DevTools, maybe you're the developer for this site. These are those are things that seem feasible, but again, ideas are cheap.
And this is what I mean about the kind of hesitance to building solidarity, right? There are websites in the world that are so broken that we could tell everyone that they're broken and not risk being wrong, right? I put a few in our private chat. I won't.
Also, would they even fix it? There's also that step of people just aren't going. Some people just aren't going to fix it, right?
But that's fine. You got to start someplace, and browsers could take the side of users by saying incrementally, by the way, this is wrong, and we're going to do the ratchet the same way that we did for TLS. TLS didn't get deployed on its own. We created a ratchet and then we intentionally cranked on it.
Yeah.
But here, I mean, even if the browsers provide more help to identify several issues that devs need to fix, we also need some help from management, in fact, because even if developers know that they need to fix that, maybe they are not allowed to do that because of prioritizations and different business features. So I think we need also more help from other parts apart from browsers, because maybe many times dev teams do know that they have different things to fix, but they don't have time because they don't have this kind of tickets in their sprints and these kind of things.
And this is where the browser is falling down on the job, because the browser's job is to create the solidarity, right? Like the browser is sitting in front of the management as well as the end user. And so it is the browser's lock going red that creates a problem in management that requires a solution. Management doesn't know anything about TLSA for suites, right? Like ask a CTO to explain Diffie-Hellman to you, right? Like that's not a Tuesday for them. So what we have to do is precipitate the change by creating the solidarity between the people who have the problem in the lived experience and the people who can solve the problem by making it visible to everyone. And that's the thing that kind of only the browser can do, or maybe only a search engine can do. And I'd say that there's more scope for us to help you, because the culture change you're trying to create, Estela, is so important, but it always starts from management learning that there's a problem in some degree and then deciding that it's worth fixing. So we have that. You're right. We have that education problem, but I would suggest humbly that you're not doing it wrong. We are.
No, but that's the point. I completely agree. Making it visible for also end users is the key, let's say, because if it's under just dev tools, something that you need to go deeper to see this kind of let's say, recommendations. So it's not visible for everyone, right? So yeah, making it visible for everyone is like shame on you, right? You're pointing that this is really bad and you need to fix that because your customers are looking at that also, red, whatever that you can put there.
Am I dreaming, or once upon a time, I think there was like this very short-lived experiment where, and this is some while back, where Google is actually going to label, like in the search results, sites that were like slow. And I feel like I'd read like either a blog post or a tweet, and I feel like Tammy Everts might know, because I think it might have been a blog post of hers or something like that. Anyways.
I think it was on mobile experiences.
Maybe, yeah.
We've talked about all of these things over the years, right? Like none of these are new ideas. I think that's really the tragedy from my perspective. Core Web Vitals has supplanted, I think, a lot of that in folks' thinking to the extent that it's working. Yeah, which is, by the way, super powerful, and I think everyone should be grateful for it.
Absolutely, and I keep saying it. You know, for those who may be in the chat and may not have sort of, you know, lived through the sort of lean years of web performance discussions. You know, and I still remember, you know, when Core Vitals came around, it was like, oh my God, it's like busy in here. What's going on? You know, and a lot of people were in, you know, like, you know, CMOs and devs, obviously, and SEO folks and technical SEO folks. And, you know, a lot of these roles that I'd never, A, heard of, and B, didn't think were interested in performance. But, you know, I do attribute a lot of that to Core Vitals. So I am sort of thankful for them keeping me busy, you know. We've been talking about a lot of the sort of ailments right now, like what's been, you know, painful. Like what solutions have we seen sort of coming down from the horizons? If anyone wants to chime in.
I mean,
no
that to me
solutions.
that to me is a good question, right? It's like maybe, you know, I mean, even at the start, right? We built this thing called Perf Buddy, which you can go to, and all it does is just spit out a report that you would, you know, get if you know, we're using Chrome DevTools, but it gives you more words to explain to management why it matters, right? Because I think there's a disconnect between like developers, let's say, wanting to work on performance because they feel like it's important, to explaining it to people who actually like need better words to understand what's going on, right? And then there's those people and talking to people who hold the purse strings, right? And then there's a disconnect there, and it's just like maybe web performance, as to Alex again, just these conversations that keep happening year over year and it getting better year over year. Sure, why not? But maybe we're approaching it wrong. And why isn't there more innovation like in the startup ecosystem on tools, developable tools that help with web performance? Is it because people really actually still don't care? Or like, is that something that people should be focusing on?
I think we have tools. I think it's more, I don't think, so so performance is not going to make you like a multi-million-dollar company. It might change how many extra millions you get. But the bottom line is like people are making money, they're trying to ship product and they're trying to ship features and ship them fast. I was in like 2 dev shops. I've actually never, this is my first product company I've worked for where I didn't have to just like, you're just like a code monkey trying to ship like, your tickets out the door, hit your points, hit your sprint. And if you're at a dev shop, there's no way they're going to prioritize performance because they're trying to get the client to pay for that feature. That client is the one who's going to have to care about performance and who's going to have to allow it to slow down. And if you're in a large company, it's going to be that senior leadership that's going to have to care. So how do we convince them? Some people are just going to be dumb and not ever realize that there's data behind whether like that performance can help improve their bottom line or not. But yeah, how do we, it's not just education, but like, how do you actually get people to recognize that? Because they're also still not recognizing that accessibility does kind of have the same story as well, right? Like you can actually increase like your total population of people using your site or conversions or, like whatever you count as like a win on your site if you include more of the population, right? Like, so it's a weird thing. And I don't know if some of it's cultural and people don't it's kind of like you were saying, like split between like rich or the haves and the have-nots, because most of those people that are in positions of power, usually they're going to have like faster phones and faster computers, and they're not going to realize what other people go through and not necessarily have that empathy or be able to put themselves in that place to even recognize that like you could get more if you actually, help more people through the door. I don't know what the answer is. It's a hard problem.
I swear this one time I was shopping and I'm on like, gig fiber, whatever. And I was trying to do this sale and I was like, okay, I click on a product and then I sit my phone down and brush my teeth and wait for it to load. Right. And I did that for a few hours. I was like, what am I doing? I'm just not going to buy anything right now. Well, they lost a few $100s because I couldn't even operate. And, I'm a fast shopper, especially on a sale, right? So I wanted to go boom, 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 and just buy everything immediately within 10 minutes. Instead, I spent a few hours and ended up not buying anything.
And you're not on a slow device or a slow network, right?
No.
Depressing. And also,
that's a big website.
A huge part of performance is that user experience. You didn't think of like, sorry, I was also an MBA, but like, people are coming to your site to get a job done. And getting that job done as fast as possible, that can actually be more of a user experience problem. You have too many steps in your flow, or you have like, It's not just what we think of as raw performance numbers like speed and layout shift and responsiveness. It's like you've made your business process so convoluted that it takes forever to do what you're trying to do, right?
And, you still have bottlenecks at every step, so that makes things a little crazy. As Alex would say, society is delaminating. The haves and the haves not are really just like split far apart. But when I'd mentioned kind of solutions, I was thinking like in more recent times, there've been some frameworks out there sort of touting what they're doing to be sort of like creating a sort of JavaScript free experience until absolutely needed. So I'm thinking of like the Enhance of the worlds. I know the good people at Quick out there sort of like making some noise. God, who else is there? Like Solid. Who out there has sort of done some work with these frameworks, like, is there one that has been sort of like impressing you for whatever reason?
Yeah, old school PHP and Python and Ruby have been killing it this whole time.
Okay.
Sending some HTML down the wire is pretty great. I recommend it.
All right. Did you hear that, folks? Just said HTML down the wire.
Right.
No, but I can't fault that. And this is something that I know I've been speaking to the enhanced people for a minute. I'm actually going to see some in a couple of weeks in person, believe it or not. But many of them have been
Less
trying to.
jokingly, like the new stuff, Stimulus, the TurboLink, the hot wired stuff is actually quite good in terms of adding little bits here and there. The ones you mentioned actually, I think, are quite responsible. I've seen Svelte kit sites that take 3 seconds to get to first contentful paint on a fast network. So like you can shoot yourself in the foot with any tool. The important part is carrying. The important part is measuring. Start there. Don't switch your tools. Learn to operate your system. The problem teams have is not that they have the wrong tool. It is that they do not operate their systems. Their systems operate them. And so you will not pick a better tool. You will not improve your outcomes until you learn to operate the system that you have, and then go shopping. Right? Until you know what looks good on you, don't go buying a new thing. Right? Like that's kind of the way this flies.
Absolutely, and
Say that to all my side projects in the basement, Alex.
but it gets back to what I sort of mentioned earlier. I think people aren't deep diving into their tooling or tools, period. And they're like, okay, I sort of like don't like how this feels in my hand now. I'm just going to jump into something else. Meanwhile, they've been holding it wrong, I mean, that's always been my sort of perception because the way it was like, people are playing musical framework. It's like jumping around framework to framework and whatnot. Does anyone else have something that they want to sort of like shout out? Because I know we've been sort of streaming down this road, but is there something that some people want to sort of mention out the gate?
Yeah.
Yoav, I see your mic's on.
Yeah, so there's this conversation that Gilberto started in chat, and I think it's an interesting one because we've been talking about developers and what are they doing or not doing for web performance. And at the same time, there are multiple actors on each site, and like there are ones that the developers can control, and then ones that they cannot, all the third parties. And right now, Core Web Vitals is incentivizing developers and their management to work on performance and improve that. But I don't know that there are currently no direct incentives on third parties. They may be indirect ones if we are telling the management will have to understand that this third party is causing this problem, and then they can apply some pressure on them. And if enough people do that, then the third party will be a better citizen. But there is no direct loop. And this is something that I am personally thinking about a bunch. And this seems like something that potentially browsers can do something on. Just as a very simple example, third parties that are triggering a lot of long tasks, eating up a lot of JavaScript, browsers could deprioritize them. And that would have a direct impact on that third party's bottom line, not on the site that embed them, but on that third party. And that will incentivize them to then be better citizens. So,
that's amazing.
Yeah, basically, I think that we now have the technology to be basically as part of my soft navigation efforts. I built this infrastructure that enables us to know what script triggered any JavaScript task.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not necessarily long tasks, but basically we have in Chromium, it's called Task Attribution Tracker. I am planning to also bring that to like specify this and try to get other browsers to also adopt a similar concept. But essentially, I think it gives us a way to know, okay, this third party is doing all these different tasks. We can attribute them to this third party, and then if it's triggering long tasks, we can then throttle that particular like the particular task that this script triggers, as well as other like similar ideas. So this is all like, again, just personal thoughts, things that I'm planning to explore, but I think that we can do better.
It's almost like baked in GDPR into the browser. Like in a very bizarre way. Just saying, like, controlling third parties and stuff.
So
It's
I
more
don't
than-
know if GDPR is the right analogy here, but basically, yeah, like, again, incentives and feedback loops. We need more alignment.
And I do think that has, like, we talk a lot about JavaScript frameworks, but like the number of sites that are using that versus the number of sites that aren't and have like other third parties, like this is also a huge area. Yeah, it's probably the number one JavaScript type problem we see on sites is that it's too many third parties and those third parties are inefficient,
I think this gets to something really important, which is that, as Estela was mentioning earlier, these things tend to be cultural, right? And so so I have a sadness that the community seems to be regressing in a bunch of ways because getting to third parties are hard, right? You have, like you said, Yoav, you have to get that conversation going. You have to get management involved. You have to create a belief that changing something can make something better, that the next marketing thing that adds something isn't just going to regress everything and blow everybody up, right? Like that you have to get everyone on the same page that this matters, we can do it, we're good enough, smart enough, gosh darn it, people like us. And that requires building capacity inside of an organization. And it's extremely hard to do that when you've got no evidence that you can improve anything. So the first step in a lot of these partnerships that we've worked on for a lot of years now has been getting teams into a place where they can operate their own systems. Then they can start to have a thought about a third-party system. So when you can't operate your own system, asking someone else to change it when you can't even quantify what the impact is going to be, it falls apart immediately. And so it's been kind of frustrating to see first-party behavior go so sideways, if not backwards, on us over the last decade. When this is urgent and third parties are a problem, but we can't even get to it because the first parties are regressing.
Indeed. Anyone else? I know Yoav had mentioned.
Yes, I'd like to add something here because I know that there are some solutions such as Party Town from Builder that allows you to open a different thread to execute different scripts. I haven't tested it yet. It sounds good in theory, so I don't know if any of you have already tested that. But I mean, there are some options, but in fact, it's like a workaround, right? It's because there are no way to manage that properly in the main thread, so we need to find a workaround to move that to another thread to make sure that it doesn't impact on web performance, right?
Yep. Indeed, Party Town. I almost forgot about them.
So I think it's promising in a way, but I have yet to see real life data from production side that have used it and benefited from it. It's essentially delaying the third-party loading, but I'm not 100% sure that it reduces actual work on the main thread for a lot of the workloads. So I basically, if anyone out there has data, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, indeed. And speaking of data, we've talked about RUM data quite a bit. I mean, I'm speaking with Nick tomorrow, actually. We're going to take a deep dive and look at RUM Archive and see what they're doing over at Akamai, which I'm super looking forward to. It's at 1 o'clock tomorrow. I'll tweet it out a little later for those who want to sort of tune in. But something I've been excited about, because rum data is obviously very important. And and I was thinking about it again. It's like, okay, people are getting into performance and trying to understand everything's going on, and now we're hitting them with like more data. It's like, oh no, but this is rum data, and they're like, rum, what's going on? By the way, again, as Cian mentioned, rum real user metrics. What is actually happening out in the field is what we're measuring, because ultimately that is what we want to measure as closely and monitor as closely as possible. Alex, what else is been on your mind?
Well, we mentioned sort of performance management maturity, and Dora Militari's talk. So that's the name that slipped my mind earlier, from Perf Now. Check it out if you haven't seen it. That's always top of mind, because the teams that I work with have big problems, because they've got really, really, really big apps, shockingly large apps, and I think the thing that the impressions that I walk away with from those conversations are that, management buy-in matters a lot. So we've talked a lot today about how to develop that, or like why it's essential and how it can help. And then teams have to, have a target, list, things to go burn down, stuff to improve, and then ways to demonstrate that it matters. So we've talked a lot about rum data today. My experience has been that high performance teams need both rum data as well as quick turnaround bench data. So like, Yoav, if you or I send a CL into the Chromium commit queue, we'll get data back pretty quickly whether or not something is going to regress one of our stock synthetic test bench metrics, just that we know are kind of guardrails. Teams have to have those kinds of guardrails, and building those kinds of things out doesn't happen by accident. It happens intentionally. And so I then leave the idea with folks of trying to work with product owners and product managers to develop a set of critical user journeys. What do you believe are the things that your users are going to do? And not just like the one action on that one page. I mean, like the steps end to end, getting them scripted, getting them on the bench, making sure that when a developer lands a CL, they're not just moving time around. It can be participating in the whole end-to-end flow, and that your metrics will capture things like that. So those are the management support enabled things that are possible with the tools we have now that really support teams in keeping the gains that they've made. But yeah, keeping the gains you make, I think, is probably top of mind.
Absolutely. Regression sucks. That's for sure. I mean, it's almost 1:30 here, so we've been at it close to 90 minutes. Sia,
Yes.
I mean, I don't think I got to you. What's keeping you up at night?
That's related to performance.
But I mean,
How's your
Or
dog
like life in
doing?
we'll get into the life stuff another time. Maybe a little bit of perf right now.
I feel like this question is like the what do you think people are doing wrong? You're doing it wrong, I don't it's funny I don't know if this keeps me up at night, but so my team changed to like professional services. When I joined, it was supposed to be for anyone that was like at this one level, they could use our services. But what would happen is like we'd come in, we do an audit, we say you should prioritize these things, and like things would never get done. So for me, it's still the like, how do we? I mean, it's better than it was before, like the Core Web Vitals stuff, because people finally do care. But now I'm getting feedback, but it's still kind of a struggle. And now that people have to pay, it's like, well, at least that's one more step. They have to pay, so they're more convinced. So they're more likely to get it done. And then there's still the people that just can't afford that kind of service. So we're trying to provide like, DIY, like how to do it yourself and stuff like that. Like, what are the things you should watch out for? I guess, yeah, the big thing is like a lot of these people they're merchants, and so they're not developers. They'll buy a theme off the shelf and it's not doing something right. So like, how do we get to like these thousands of themes and make them better so that the merchants don't have as much of a problem. I don't know. I don't know if these are the things that keep me up at night.
I mean,
I
it
think
sounds
it's
like
probably like the internal, like corporate stuff, but like that's the stuff I can't talk about. Like
no,
we should
I'm
be
sure.
not that.
I was going to say this is something that I know, a conversation that the core perf team over at WordPress has been talking about, like having a little bit of tighter control over themes and whatnot, which again eventually makes its road down to sort of literacy and stuff like that. So
It might be like how to
understood.
test too, because we do have some speed testing, but it's not great. It's like it's Lighthouse based, but it's also like how do you test? How do you semi-fairly test either themes or what we call partners or third parties? Because people can make multiple changes on their website at first or at once, and so you don't know if it was suddenly slowed down because of this app install or because of this other app install, or was it the theme or this other thing, or you're using this theme in a completely different way, and so I don't know, that's tough.
Understood. Cool. Tracy, did you have some mentions?
No, I'm definitely inspired by this though, and I'm like, oh man, somebody needs to build more product. We should do like a web perf hackathon. I mean, you did it, Sia, right? Or I guess you chose web perform like to focus on that during your internal hackathon.
Yeah.
But I think that would be pretty fun. I think like, while I feel like the browsers could and probably should, if they could, like put more of a smackdown on some of these people who are like not caring about web performance. That would be amazing. But it'd be cool to see, like, in this age of developer experience, developer productivity, like developer metrics, some interesting innovation to come out of that related to web performance. That would be amazing.
I will say that I'm a huge fan of web page tests and opportunities and experiments, because it used to be a lot harder to test, like, oh, if I make this one change, will it make it faster? Will it not make it faster? And I can just like do that so much more easily now than before. Yeah. So
Thank you. The team at Catchpoint's web page test thanks you. Absolutely.
Really my dog.
Yeah, dog's excited. I mean, again, we are basically touching on 90 minutes right now. Tracy, what's the call here?
Well, I think we'll have to end it here, but all these amazing folks are on Twitter and they're all really nice people. So if you can find them on Twitter and chat with them, Henri, sounds like you're having some great conversations as well. So watching his timeline would be amazing. Alex, is your JavaScript Jabber out yet? Yes. Yeah. So yeah, you can check out Alex's recent podcasting on JavaScript Jabber. And all these folks here are also great at going to conferences. So you might see them at an upcoming conference. So thank you again so much, everyone, for hanging out and chatting, and we'll see you next time.